Okay, we are recording. We are streaming. How about we do this thing? We're going musicless because that seems to be working out okay for all things streaming. But yeah, here we go. We're doing stuff. I hope you're doing well. I've had a morning. I had to put on pants. I had to leave the house. It was as much of an atrocity as you might imagine, though the sandwich I got was really, really good. So that's nice. I don't know if it makes up for the fact that I had to put on pants and leave the house, but yeah, okay, here we are. All the same. Okay. Everything is delightful, peachy, and keen. I'm getting notifications that it is in fact time for this week's Writers Chat. So let's do that sweet, sweet intro. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, pantsers, plotters, nacho lovers, anybody who can appreciate layering up in cold, inclement, shitty weather, anybody who can possibly appreciate a really nice root beer when you're having just kind of a blah day, anybody lonely, anybody who's ever, decided, yeah, whatever, I'll just have, something simple for dinner. People who have written books lately, people who are going to publish books soon, anybody who's saved a file in multiple places because you just weren't sure if you saved it 5 minutes ago, anybody who's taken their meds, had a nap, feels rested, and is having an interesting day, and most importantly, the comrades. This is the Writers Chat for, I want to make sure I get this date right, for Tuesday the 30th of January. And boy, howdy, do we have some really interesting questions. It's been one of the things I've noticed in going through the list of questions lately. There have been just some really nice, dense, chewy ones, and that makes me real happy. So give me 2 seconds, and we will rock and roll for all the right and I guess some of the wrong reasons. Let me just do this, make sure all my ducks are in a row. Done. Yes, we're good. Okay, here we go. Let's do this. So, hi, I'm John. How are you? How have you been? It's been a while since we talked last, and I hope you're doing well. This is the Writer's Chat. If you have no idea what I'm talking about or what this is, I, a writing coach since 1996, am here to answer questions you have about all different kinds of writing and publishing and editing and marketing and revising and scripting and doing and all that good book stuff. I want to help you do it better. So I've got questions. I'll answer the questions from people in chat. Hello, chat. And I've got questions here from people who've already asked me stuff. And I'm looking forward to giving you some answers and getting you the help you need to do the thing you want to do the way you want to do it to the best of your ability. So, with all that going out of the way, here we go with question number 1. How do you build an ending? What does it need? When does it work? Okay. Here's what that means. Here's how this goes. An ending is the culmination of all the threads you've had in your story. So the ending is going to come after the climax. So there should not be any real significant emotional spikes in terms of tension or risk. There can be, a happily ever after. That's a kind of ending where you have some kind of urgency or question, but it's mostly on a positive front. It's everything else is taken care of. What about this stuff? You have a negative ending or a sad ending or a cliffhanger where we get some kind of resolution, but there's also some stuff left hanging. The first step in building an ending is figuring out if you're going to tie up all your loose ends or not. Now, a lot of people will also take that to mean that we have to, in our ending, figure out if we're going to, not end things here because we're going to messily create room for a sequel, which is a bad strategy. But usually you want to, step 1, figure out if we're going to end the book here or if we're going to leave any stuff uncovered. That doesn't mean you have to go all the way back through and address every single thing to every single degree, like what happens to Martha in chapter 11 who parked her car in front of you. That stuff doesn't really matter, but the big stuff, the important stuff, the character stuff, the plot stuff, are we going to end it with that having some kind of complete closure? Or is there some stuff we're going to leave open? Is there some stuff we're going to mention, some stuff we're not? You get to sort out what you're going to end. And then you're going to prioritize. Because the bigger important stuff, you have to figure out when you're going to say it. So, for instance, if you have two characters in a romance novel, and we're trying to see if, the big climax was a moment where they admit their feelings for each other, the music swells, it's this whole big thing. You want to see if maybe they have like implications for like, what are we doing tomorrow night? Or, hey, you can come over and we can hook up or something. You want to leave that on a positive end. So your ending for your story should include something that is hopeful or aspiring to go forward. That you don't just end it on, well, it's over and done, goodbye. You want an ending that satisfies your sense of the story. I wanted a happy ending, so I wrote something happy that suggests that if this story were to continue, this is the big critical thing with an ending. If this story were to continue, in what direction? Happy, unhappy, positive, not positive, etc., etc., etc. If it were to keep going, in what direction would it trend? The specifics, it would end poorly because of A, B, and C. The A, B, and C don't really matter. You can get there if you want to get there, but by and large, knowing that an ending's primary component is the general trajectory of it is going to help you go a long way in solving or resolving any kind of story stuff that's left over. The plot's already done because the plot was wrapped up with the climax. So we need to just package up the after effects, the consequences of plot, the consequences of having the characters do the story to the degree they've been doing the story. An ending works when you accomplish that. When you say all the things that need or you are interested in saying, because there's some stuff you just don't need to cover. But when you get that idea across, and it's okay, we've ended positively, we've talked about what happens now that the plot is out of the way, we've talked about the kind of trajectory I want to put the characters on, and we've packaged up everything in a nice, neat little bow, then you're just done. And you don't need to keep belaboring the point of like making it extra mega super clear that, it's going to be happy, you guys, I promise. Here's another 5 paragraphs to remind you that it's going to be happy. Just have it be happy and get out of the way. Building an ending is about understanding the trajectory you want the story to go on, and then wrapping up your dangling subplots and main plot and character arc stuff. And then when everything is all said and done, you just find an ending scene, find an ending beat, find an ending moment to end your story at. Beyond that, it becomes so specific to the book in question, because at that point we're talking about, well, in your book, you're writing this kind of story. It should involve this and this and this. Giving general advice on an ending is going to be kind of broad just because of the way endings are. I hope that helps. I hope that answers the question. I hope that makes a difference. If not, let me know and I will get more detailed or more specific as you like. On we go, though, to question 2. Question 2. How do I get better at coming up with details for describing my setting? When it comes to putting, it should be putting. When it comes to putting my characters in a space, I have a hard time picturing anything. Okay, setting isn't the right word for this question. Setting is sort of the big picture stuff, like the setting of this is on Earth, as opposed to this scene is taking place in a room. But okay, let's just cover the from the biggest to the smallest level of detail. How do you get better at coming up with details? You need to think about the items that would be around the characters. Let's start from the characters as our center point and work outward. So, do we know what space they're in? Okay, yeah, they're on Earth. Sure, fine. Let's use me recording this in this room as our example. We could start off by saying we're on planet Earth and we're on this continent and we're in this nation, in this state, in this area, and zoom it all the way down from there. You don't have to. That's way too much detail, and nobody's really going to care if we're on Earth or not, if all of our story takes place on Earth. So instead, let's start simply, because this is a difficult thing for a lot of people. You get people with aphantasia or other kinds of issues that make just mental imagining of space and objects difficult. I am familiar with the idea of being unable to, grapple with images in my head. I can do, like scenes and stuff, but if you give me 3 dots and say draw a triangle, without a ruler, we're going to get some real funny looking triangles from me. But let's start practically, because this can be a practically done thing. Where are the characters? Are they standing? Are they sitting? Are they floating in space? Start there. What is the name of the room they're in? What kind of room is it? You don't have to put that into the text, but you have to know sort of like in your head. So right now, we're in the office. It's a nice room. It's on the 2nd floor of a house. I'm seated. Okay. We could stop there. You don't really want to, but we could stop there. And then what we want to do is figure out what the characters are doing in this space, because if they're doing something, chances are they're going to be engaging with other stuff to do it. So right now, I'm talking into a microphone, and I'm watching the little meter on the screen go up and down, and I'm looking at my monitor, and I'm reading words on it, and I'm occasionally moving my face to see different things on the screen. And then when I, need to stop and focus or think for a second, I look away from the screen to the stuff on my desk. That's just the action the character is doing. And from there, the things I interact with, I can start listing. Here's a microphone. The microphone has a cable. It's right here. It runs across this arm and down across the table, and it plugs into the back of this other machine. That's right here. That machine has a cable that runs over to that computer. It's right there. And the computer has a cable that runs to the, the internet, and then the power plug and all that stuff down there on the floor. The monitor's right here in front of me. The desk has certain objects on it. Here's my cup of tea. Here's the root beer I had with lunch. There's my phone, that kind of stuff. So if we start from the character as a central point, we can work outward. Now, I didn't cover everything on the desk. I didn't mention the lamp that's on. I didn't mention the cat. I didn't mention the little fridge that I keep at the far end of there to keep, medication and stuff cold. I didn't talk about my headphones are over here. So is a metal straw, a non-disposable straw. Then there's a silicone coaster, my speakers for my music, or the printer. I didn't mention any of those things. Why? I wasn't wanting to. One of the things you've got to get your head around, even if you can't easily picture everything, is that you have absolute control over what you describe. So if I'm omitting my capitalism is the bad guy mug full of pens, which is right here next to the little timer I use to keep track of my time and my schedule, yeah, if I'm not mentioning that, it doesn't need to be a thing in your head, so I didn't mention it. If I just call the desk cluttered, and I say it's cluttered with pens and pencils and cables, and leave it at that, it is. But the specifics, you don't really need to know at this moment. If I want to get specific, I can have follow-up sentences. But you get better at developing what those sentences could be and should be based on the decisions of, well, what's the character interacting with? I'm sitting in a chair. I'm talking into this microphone. I'm looking in this direction. My hands are here on the table or there on the keyboard or on the mouse, or what am I doing? By orienting at that level of detail, which is called close proximal distance, the mental camera of the reader is pretty zoomed in so that they see these things not necessarily individually and devoid of context, but if we're zooming in on my root beer from lunch, your face is going to be pretty close to it. if your face was a camera that is relaying an image to your brain, because every sentence is a camera. But when we're describing the office and I just say it's cluttered, but I don't give you any follow-up detail, the notion, the concept of clutter all of a sudden fills the room rather than just the desk, because now a cluttered office is assumed to have more than just a messy desk. Now it's going to have a messy desk and a chair and boxes and this, that, and the other, and I don't know, garbage cans and furniture and all other stuff. You want to be careful in what you assign certain words to that conjure certain images. If this room was empty, you probably have a very easy time picturing an absence of stuff. But if I said it was empty except for, all of a sudden now I'm taking an item and I'm individuating it, I'm separating it from its space, and I'm doing something. But this comes down to having a practical decision made first as to where do I want the reader to imagine standing, sitting, floating in the room, and what would they see? And it just comes down to making a set of decisions. Not like, oh, the shade of this iced tea is this particular Pantone color, which, I would use this adjective for. Doesn't really fucking matter. Not really a thing. Good for you for figuring out the shade of my iced tea. It's not going to change a damn thing. But I guess that's where you want to spend some energy, sure. But if I want to tell you that the desk is a tangle of cables and cords right now, that's something to picture. The specifics of which cord snakes over what cord doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Knowing at 100% would be fine if I was giving you a quiz or demanding that you completely remember everything exactly verbatim. But we don't have that kind of contract with our readers when we're writing. And it doesn't mean that if in this paragraph, in this moment, I say a thing about what's on the desk, and then later I mention a thing in another paragraph like, oh, right. So, John is sitting here recording his chat. He's talking into the microphone, et cetera, et cetera. If I mention I have a fidget device right here in my hand now, if I mention that I take the fidget off my desk, you can make a case. Well, you didn't say that in the previous paragraph. Yeah, but I'm saying it now. And it's not interrupting the flow of anything that's happening in the story. While John is answering a question, he picks up a fidget device. He picks up a pen. He, reaches over and sips his tea. Those small details did not have to be accounted for all at once in paragraph, let's say number 1, so that I was only allowed to bring them up in paragraph 3 because I had mentioned them in 1. You don't need to. You can mention anything at any goddamn time. It's more a matter of making the decision first about what's immediately around the reader. Not that you have to have a clear picture of it in your head if you're having trouble with a specific picture, but you at least need the intellectual knowledge of here's a chair, here's a this, here's a that. And then you can get more detailed from there, thinking about things in pieces and then stitching it together on the page. I talk to people about you've got to picture everything cinematically, picture it like a camera. And it's not the best approach because it does not account or afford any or a lot of latitude for people who struggle to picture things. But in those cases, picture it intellectually. Picture it not in a great level of detail. Picture it conceptually. It's an office. What sort of things do I think about of what goes into an office? And then pick and choose some of them and let's just put them in the room. No one's going to, get angry that, most rooms have a potted plant and there's no potted plant in here. No, the potted plant is now in the hallway because it needs more light. So it wouldn't matter. Does it matter that my trash can is not a wire metal mesh thing? It's a plastic bright green one because that's the trash can I've had since about 1998. And it feels weird to throw out a trash can. No, doesn't matter. The specifics become important if I need you to specifically focus on them. But the concept can take up the space you need. But it comes down to making decisions. Position the character in the room and then work around them. Whether you go clockwise, counterclockwise, divide the room in sections, doesn't really matter. But put the characters somewhere in your head, think about what's around them, and then start writing. You don't have to write, John was in the room. The room is the room he uses for the chat. Like, we're not writing a thing for children, so we don't need to go hyper simplistic. But when we're thinking about those details, start from the character, start from their action, and then work out into what else is in the room, what else is going on, what other actions are occurring while the character is taking an action, what the kind of big picture details, time, weather, temperature, season, etc., big stuff like that, and bounce around from all those details in a way that feels comfortable to your writing style. That's how we get better at this. It's decision making, because writing is the act of making decisions. Great question. Now, Twitch is telling me there's an ad coming. I'm going to keep moving. On we go to question 3. Question number 3. Where would you begin planning a cozy romance? Okay. Cozy romance. There's a terrible rumor that cozy romance is my nemesis. This is untrue. I don't really have a nemesis. I have more, it's not even a dislike for cozy romance. It's that I wish some cozy romances leaned more on romance and less on cozy. And I wish a lot of writers who write cozy romance didn't revel so much in the fact that they are intentionally writing mediocre cozy romance on purpose, because to them it's a quick cash grab. Because cozy romance by design doesn't need a lot of depth because it's a cozy. You're not going to write a cozy romance in the same way you would write like a big sweeping romantic epic, because it's a cozy. The stakes are much lighter. The scenes are usually fewer in number. The stakes a lot lower. The plot less complicated. Things are a little bit more linear and straightforward, giving the overall structure of a cozy kind of a simple, disposable, vibe. We can write a cozy, read it, and kind of go, yeah, that was a good read. It passed the time. It scratched the itch. But it wasn't like, I'm deeply invested in this book. Page upon page is full of rich imagery or something. That's not bad, but I think there's so much room on the virtual shelf and in the writing space for so much more than cozies. And I think a lot of writers would be well served to at least attempt a non-cozy. And there are writers out there producing cozies who I think are unserious or not as serious as they could be about the writing process. They could really do something if they push themselves. But for any number of reasons, they're not. I wish they would. But it's that view that gave other people the idea that I don't like cozies. I don't like cozies because I don't like reading them, but that's separate than me saying, like, I don't like them existentially. Well, they're there. People like them. That's fine. They're just not for me. But when I'm asked, how would I begin to plan one? That's interesting. Because it's a good craft question. And I like a good craft question. So here's how I would begin to plan a cozy romance. You're going to want to start your plan probably in the same way you would want to do a plan for a cozy mystery, which is to say you want to craft a plot. Not so much the characters first. You can just call them A and B for now, and then figure out a plot that has an inherent conflict. A loves B, but. Or A and B want to get together, but. Or here are the reasons why B can't tell A how they feel. Find a way to frame a plot with a conflict, because that's going to give your story something compelling to motivate it, because the characters are going to interact with the challenge of that question to move the story forward. B can't tell A how they feel because that would mean accepting the truth about the life B has currently. B can't tell A how they feel because that would mean they have to admit to themselves that they're unhappy in their current marriage, and they fantasize about leaving their wife for A. So that tension in their life is what keeps their relationship passionate, fiery, but taboo and secretive. Something like that. Find the tension in the plot setup. And then next step, when we're crafting the characters, figure out a way they can interface with that tension. So in our cheater example, or our marriage ruiner, homewrecker, whatever stupid trope label we want to stick to it. It's a dumb thing to have a label for, but here we are. If B's upset, B can't tell A how they feel because of a pre-existing marriage to C. The tension for B is having feelings for A but not being able to pursue them, as well as having a related amount of tension for or dislike or disagreement with C. So that stacks B's plate pretty full. A, what is A's side of this? Maybe A knows about C and knows that B is unhappy and isn't so much demanding that B leave C, but A wants B to be happy and is in an awkward position because they're sort of waiting for B to do something before A can be happy. So we've got some tension there for A. And maybe if we're going to throw some complication in here, we can create some tension for C because C knows that B is unhappy, and maybe C resents A because A is making B happy in a way that C couldn't. We haven't gone very far. We haven't assigned names. We haven't thought about how one of these people might be a firefighter, or one of these people could be like a world famous botanist or a cheesemaker or something. It's just that we found tension. Now, that tension in your plot is going to be the most tense thing in the book, in the story, in the manuscript. Every other tension, the confrontation B is going to have with C about A through coded language at the church social, is, going to be a moment of tension, but it's never going to be a bigger deal than the underlying issue at the heart of our story. So we start building tension. One of the next things we do after we find the tension and build it, and then interface or interconnect our characters with it, is we want to create a way of figuring out who our point of view characters are. Maybe you've made this decision already. That's fine. But this is the moment I would do it in, because once we know what the story could be, figuring out how we're going to present it to the reader makes a difference. If we're following B as they fight with C and pine for A, that's a different story than following A who wants B, and we don't really get to get a lot of C because A doesn't interact with C so much. And if we do it from C, we don't really engage with the romance between B and A because C is left at home while B runs off with A. Finding your point of view character, and whether you do one or whether you do two is up to you. But here's where we find them. And we find the point of view character based on our decision as to what makes for the most interesting presentation of this tension. It's not about getting it complete. It's not about telling the most detailed story. It's about what's the most engaging way to lay out this problem and follow people going through it. And for my money, the way we've described it, B is our point of view character, and probably our only point of view character. Because if we jump out and have B, and then we also have A, because just so we're clear, you're under no obligation to have 2 points of view in romance. It is incredibly popular, but it is not required. If you don't have it, you're not losing cool points. You're not less likely to get published or any bullshit like that. You can have whatever point of view characters you want. Some plot and some causes of tension and some sources of story are going to be a better fit for multiple points of view, 2 or 3 or whatever, and some are going to be better for 1. And I think the way I made this, it's better for 1. That's all right. Once we figure out that B is our point of view character, we can start defining those roles more clearly. What does B do for a living? What is A doing for a living? What gender identities or relationship identity do we want to have for B and A and C? Is this a hetero romance? Is this an LGBTQ plus romance? Is this complicated by any factors? Is this a bisexual romance, for instance, where B is in a, let's say, a hetero relationship with C and dissatisfied because they're more interested in exploring their maybe homosexual interests with A. That's a thing that happens because monogamy is an interesting story device. It's not always a great social construct, but it could give us some interesting moments in the story. That's fine. But we start narrowing down things about A, B, and C. What are their gender identities? Maybe a name or two. Maybe a job. Maybe we set up some kind of like relationships because of their job. Do A, B, and C all work in the same office? Are B and C older than A? Is A older than C? Is A older than B? What kind of just choices can we make about these characters? And then after that, lastly, we build a setting. Where does this take place? Big city, small town, small neighborhood in a big city, little quiet town somewhere where, this is a big shocking deal. And then you figure out names and ages and all those other particulars. That's how you begin to plan a cozy. Notice we didn't get into scene construction. We didn't really map out what a climax could be because it doesn't, at the early stages, doesn't specifically matter if our big climax is C dealing with B or B telling C that they're happier with A at the church social, or if the climax of our story is B having a fight with C and then driving in the rain to meet A somewhere. Doesn't matter. Any of those are valid choices, but we don't plan there. We don't start there. We start with the potential and see where the idea-making process leads us. What a great question. Now, last week when I did this, there wasn't any audio in this moment because I forgot to turn the audio back on. So I fixed that problem. Now, anybody in chat? Hi, chat. How are you? Anybody with any questions about anything? We could talk more about the cozy. We could cover more about endings. You could ask a random thing about what sandwich I had for lunch. I don't know. Questions? I'm doing all right. I was not pleased about leaving the house. It's cold and damp and gray and ugh. But I was happy to get out for a hot 10 minutes. The sandwich I had was a banger. I was really pleasantly surprised, and I got a root beer. So, hooray, root beer. Very happy with that. But I'm good. I feel good. I'm happy-ish. It's a good day. It's a good day. And I get to answer questions and talk to people, which is the most thrilling, exciting part of my day. Love it. Love it so much. Hope you're doing well, too. Other questions, issues, etc. I'm feeling more comfortable with OBS over Ecamm. I tried doing Ecamm yesterday to test drive a few things, and it was just not cooperating. So I'm happy you're here. This is going well. We'll keep going. Other things, issues, etc. All right. On we go. Question number 4. What are the biggest things that hold writers back from their success? Yeah, there's a couple. Biggest is interesting. I hadn't really thought to rank them, but I'll give you the few that I think most commonly and most intensely hold writers back. I think there's, first and foremost, a fear. Maybe multiple fears, but definitely a fear of rejection, a fear of being judged about what they do or what they've made, a fear that maybe they wasted their time. They had these big dreams about something, writing and having it go well, and they're afraid to discover that they're not as good at it as they think, or that the process of doing it is a lot harder than the daydream. Like they thought about it a certain way, and it shouldn't have been that hard, and it turned out to be real difficult, and they're not really happy, or they're afraid of discovering that. They're afraid of wasting their time. They're afraid of being rejected. They're afraid of nobody liking their work. Or it's also worth pointing out, maybe they're afraid of people liking their work, and then all of a sudden this thing they've been doing that's been a hobby or an escape or just this kind of like thing I'm doing just because whatever, all of a sudden turns into a job. All of a sudden it turns into this serious thing. And it feels weird to be disciplined and serious about it, because it wasn't that long ago you were just kind of sitting there doing it whenever, but now it's a thing, and there's people counting on you and responsibility and stuff. So I think fear is definitely a huge motivator in holding people back, because they know they might not be able to verbalize the specifics of what the fear is, but they are afraid of something or multiple things. In addition to fear, I think there's also a hesitancy to take risk, because let's say you're writing that romance novel. There's a risk socially to being perceived differently by other people. Like if you write if you write what you think is a really, dirty, hot sex scene. Somebody's doing some things with a mouth or a hand, and people might be surprised that you wrote the thing. There's that social anxiety, that social pressure of, oh my God, will somebody think differently of me if they read this thing I made? And because of that, because there's that chance that they could, you intentionally hold back. I don't want somebody to think I'm a big giant dork for writing a fantasy novel. I'm not gonna push it so far, or I'm gonna downplay what I'm doing, because I don't want you to think different of me than you already do. So I think there's a real hesitancy to take a social risk that way. I think also when people start looking at writing as more than just a thing they like doing, when they start looking at the business of it or the plan for the business of it, they start seeing what's popular, and they feel some kind of pressure to, I guess conform might be the word, conform to that kind of idea. I've got to make something that's sort of popular, so I better throw this in and add this or say this or write that. And there are varying degrees of that. I mean, not everybody does it 100 million% and just, clones the common popular stuff. But I think there's a risk or a fear about standing too far out and being too out there. I don't mean like that edgy, immature way of being like, I'm too edgy and they can't handle the truth, because that's just bullshit. But it's more like, what interests me might not interest or have wide appeal interest, because let's say you're writing you're writing a time travel horror story, and everybody's time travel is one thing and horror is another thing, and trying to cross those two because you have this idea in your head might mean it's hard for either audience to get on board. So you are afraid of taking the risk in pursuing your thing your way. I think there's also a hesitance to practice. See, I don't think, all right, let's be clear about that. I don't think there's hesitation or a risk in writing. People like to write. I think there's some idea, though, that there's a difference between just writing. I'm just screwing around, no big deal, just working on a draft, just writing a book. I maybe want to try. But there's a difference between doing that and I'm seriously writing chapter 8 of the second draft. All of a sudden, there's this additional weight to it, this extra step, hoops to jump through, or a way that it should be. Expectation is a huge factor that holds people back. Writing has to be done this way. It has to use this software. I have to have beta readers. I have to have alpha readers. I have to be on Twitter. I have to say this, do this, know this, keep this in my head, keep that in my head, operate a certain way. And if I don't, then something nebulous and scary bad will happen. Expectation, I think, frames that. And I think expectation is what kind of keeps the risks at bay. If I just behave in a certain way, if I just stay within these lines, then I won't really have to take the risks, and it'll be fine because I'll be doing more or less what I see everybody else doing. So that should just work out for me. And that's just stupid. I don't know how else to tell you that. Like, you should not want to do that. That should not be a thing. You don't have to conform like that. The opposite of conformity is not absolute, like wild, unrestrained, hootenanny. It's more a matter of, I just don't want to do what I see everybody else doing. I want to do this for me. I want to do this in this way, and I want to do it to the best of my ability. And things like those expectations about how the business works, or how it's supposed to work, or what the industry wants, or any shit like that, those often aren't correct, and they're often unimportant in the long run. For instance, I'll use a case from today. I had a lengthy conversation with somebody about copyright, because they're about to publish their book. Good job publishing your book. Proud of you. But they were suddenly concerned about copyright. And copyright's a pretty straightforward thing. You can go on one website, you pay, I think it's like $35 or $40, and it gets handled and it's done. And they were talking about how they were afraid of, protecting their work and making sure nobody steals it. And that's not really copyright so much as what they were worried about was intellectual property. And that's a whole different conversation with a whole different set of rules and a whole different set of ideas and what that means and all that stuff. But we lump it all together as copyright. And too often on the internet, people talk about that sort of like urban legend of theft. The calls were coming from inside the house. Somebody stole somebody's book. One time I heard my cousin who went to school with the person who, sat next to Ferris, who went over here, who heard that from this guy, who that guy, and went to this. And then we have a roommate who saw this, and it's this weird grapevine daisy chain of nonsense because somebody somewhere could steal your work. And while that is a thing that could happen in the same way that a meteor right now could come crashing through my office window, or all of a sudden my cat could come back into the room dragging behind it, I don't know, a Wookiee or an Ewok or a droid or something. I suppose that could happen in the quantum universe of possibilities of all the things that could happen, but the odds of it happening are pretty low. So I'm not too worried. But those expectations about how things are supposed to be or what you're supposed to do, and the influence, I'll give you the one more thing that holds writers back, the undue influence or the exertion of influence from outside forces really holds people back. I saw on Twitter, I saw this, I read this, I checked this blog, I took this class, I went to this conference, I talked to this person, I read this newsletter, and they said whatever they said. And that's got to be how it is because, they have a newsletter or they're a big fucking deal, they say, or, they're selling a thing. And fine. Oh, okay. If you want to listen to that, you can. You don't even have to listen to me, but you can. It's okay. If what I'm saying doesn't like vibe with you, if it doesn't work for you, you don't have to use it. Doesn't bother me. My day still goes on, whether you use the passive voice or not. I mean, passive voice is fine. It's not bad. I know that's shocking for some folks, but it's fine. Fucking use it. If you want to tell more than show, that's fine. It's not great. You don't want to do it like all the time, but you could use it. Go ahead. What am I going to do? How am I going to know you're using it? I can't see you. So that undue influence of I read on the internet, or the internet says, or I saw on a blog, ... I think is also a thing that holds people back because there's a lot of interest in people to know how to do a thing. Well, what about this? And what about that? And how do I do this? And how do I do that? And in the search for an answer, which is a legit thing, in that search for an answer, you get into a situation where you are inundated with advice, or I should make air quotes, advice. And at the end of the day, you're not really sure what you're supposed to do. Like 5 people tell you do this or don't do that, but they don't talk about how. Or that you're just supposed to know how to do a thing, but nobody gets around to talking about it, or they don't give good examples, or they don't really help, but they've given advice, so they've done their task. That's a big issue. And let's throw a bonus one in here one more time. I think another huge factor in why a lot of writers don't get the success they want or the success they feel they should have is because they are both, like we talked about, afraid to really put their neck out there and really risk judgment, disapproval, criticism, etc., or appearing stupid or struggling or anything like that. I think the other half of that is also that they're undersupported. There aren't enough cheerleaders. There's plenty of people talking about what they should and shouldn't do. There's plenty of scolds. There's plenty of referees. There's plenty of opinion makers and taste makers and authority figures. I'm making more air quotes. But at the end of the day, there's not enough people at an authoritative level praising them, telling them they can do this, helping them do this. I think there's an awful lot of people at their level saying, yeah, keep going, you're doing great. But it doesn't feel the same because everybody's in that same boat. Other writers telling you that you're doing great is awesome, and that should be part of it. But at the same time, imagine needing help from somebody who knows a thing you don't know, and they're also going that extra step to tell you that you're doing an okay job. One of my favorite parts in every coaching session are any of the moments where I get to tell somebody that I'm proud of them, that they're on the right track, that they wrote a good thing. It's awesome. I love that because, one, I like celebrating good work, and two, I like hearing them happy. I like hearing them have a positive response and feeling like, oh, I did do okay, because that confidence is so critical for our process, because it is from that confidence that we can infuse the rest of our thoughts onto or into our art. We use that confidence. It's fuel. So anytime you can help refill somebody's tank and help them believe in themselves to the way you believe in them, yeah, makes a huge difference. Loads of different factors hold writers back. I really, really love this question. I hope I did a nice job answering it. On we go. Question 5. Is there any value to the hashtag writing community? Questions like, what would your main character do in XYZ situation? No. Flat. No. There is no value to it. It's a masturbatory exercise designed to eat up time and space on social media, and it feels writing adjacent because you're talking about your main character, but it's not really fucking doing anything. It typically does not lead to sales. It doesn't encourage you to pitch your book. It doesn't help you talk about your plot or grow your audience. It's just, I don't know, what's the word I want to use? It's just chatter. It's fluff. It's chuffa. It's white noise. Static on the radio. It doesn't do anything. Maybe you could make the case to say that, it allows you to think about or interpret your character in a new way. But if that way is immaterial to what you're writing, like if you're writing, I don't know, a sci-fi epic, and we've got our astronaut and their crew trying to fly a ship through a war zone, it's unlikely that the question of what would you do with your character if they got stuck in a long line at the bank, that question doesn't do jack shit for you. That doesn't help you. And sharing what your character would do, I guess, is a chance to talk about your character, or at least show off and, demonstrate to some other people who don't give a shit about you how creative you were for a hot second. But it doesn't help you. It's not going to make you a better writer. Knowing that your character likes, black coffee and not cream in their coffee does not help you figure out how to fix your plot. It doesn't make you a better writer of dialogue. It doesn't help you understand subtext. It doesn't help you illustrate your theme. It's a surface level stupid question. It's like all those throwaway questions they give actors when they do press stuff, like anybody who's in a horror movie ends up getting asked, do you like to be scared? Kind of stupid, dumb shit is that? Or when you ask a comedian, like, where do you come up with your material? They're, existence. Like, it's a waste. It's just eating up time and accomplishing nothing. So many more better things could be probed or asked or suggested. If the hashtag writing community really were fucking serious and really wanted to do some good for people, they'd ask challenging questions like, hey, what was your last obstacle between you and your writing? When was the last time you felt really insecure about a scene you wrote? How did you get past it? Or, let me think of a really good one. What would you say to somebody who was going to start writing tomorrow? Those are great questions, probative questions, questions that have weight and substance that would get writers talking about their craft, about the idea of their business. Questions about business would be perfect. Are you worried about pitching? Are you worried that a 1-star review will permanently sink you thanks to our over-reliance on algorithms? How do you feel about sales copy? These are totally legit questions. I get asked them all the time in coaching sessions. They're things people give a shit about. But the hashtag writing community doesn't give a fuck about that. They don't care. They're not here to support you, gal pals. They're not here to help you girl boss and live, laugh, love, or help you be a better. They don't care. They just want you on the platform, with your hand down your pants, passing the time. If they were a real community, they would support you, they would help you, they would encourage you, they would challenge you, they would nurture you, they would help you think more critically, they would give you instruction, they would help you find your flaws and do something about them and help you see yourself more clearly so that you could express yourself more clearly so that you could turn around and do that for others. But they don't. And I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because they're not a real community. Or because they're not really interested in humans. They're interested in product. Something to think about. On we go. Question 6. What is a counter climax? Okay. Somebody's been Googling things. A counter climax is the idea that right around the time in your story where you have your big climax, the bank heist is going to go down, or the invaders are going to storm the castle or something. The big moment of your story, the big sword fight's going to go off, right? Just right around that time, there's going to be a climax for your subplot. Maybe it's the same climax in a different part. Maybe while our heroes are storming the castle, the politicians are in the town square trying to rally public support. Or maybe while our hero is having a sword fight with their arch nemesis, the wizard is, ferrying the captured people out of the dungeon. A counterclimax is a climax that sits in relationship to your primary climax, your major story climax. But it's a climax that sort of draws some of that impact away. Not necessarily weakening your climax, but it's kind of like you have a cake or a pie, and you've cut a small slice out of it to share. You still have pie. You still have your climax, but you're using a portion of it elsewhere. We're serving up a little bit of it in advance. And this usually happens right before the main climax, or it happens while we're dealing with the main climax. It's going to split the reader's attention. It's going to split the story's focus. It's called a counterclimax because of the idea that if we have a lot of stuff popping off all at once and all these people are doing different things, that we're yo-yoing that tension. Oh my God, there's this happening. Oh my God, there's that happening. What do I pay attention to? What's a bigger deal? There's some validity to that depending on how we construct it. But usually it's just a subclimax. It's a small climax or a portion of a climax to happen while other stuff is happening. That's all a counterclimax is. On we go to more questions. Oh, man. Anything? Anybody? Shall we keep moving? Let's. When is it? Oh, that's a great question. When is a counter climax useful? Oh, that's a good question. Okay. A counter climax can be useful when you have a lot of plot stuff to do and you're not quite sure when this other stuff is supposed to happen. So let's do an example of one so you can see what I'm talking about. In Empire Strikes Back, Luke and Vader and their sword fight is the climax of the story. Or Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and Lando and the droids getting out of Cloud City is the climax of the story. And the other part of that is your counter climax, depending on what we're focusing on. If we're focusing on Luke and the Force and Vader, then that's our primary climax. And then everything else is our counter climax, or vice versa. But a counter climax is useful when the story is really busy, when there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's all happening, maybe not at the same chronological time. Like it doesn't matter if that's happening at 12:05 and that's happening at 12:10, but it's happening at roughly the same narrative time. All the shit hits all the fans in all these different places. That's what makes a counter climax useful. Because you can take that section of story, that subplot, that part of the plot, and have it happen in some way, shape, or form at the same time. Let's do a movie I just watched the other night for a different thing. Any of the Mission Impossible movies, when they split off Tom Cruise plus other person to go do whatever, and then they give, usually it's, in the last couple of movies, it's been Simon Pegg or Ving Rhames or other folks. When Tom Cruise plus one are over here doing a thing and everybody else is over there doing another thing, and they're both having climactic moments that are related to the plot, but are different parts of the plot. Tom Cruise has to go over here and try not to die, while our other characters are doing like technical small stuff or just shooting some guns. That's a counter climax to Tom Cruise. It's useful when the story is very busy and you want to maintain tension in a lot of spots without jumping around too much. It's a useful tool. It doesn't get as much use as you might think, but it's a useful tool, or it can be. It's a good question. It's a really good question. On we go. Shall we keep moving? Question 7. In the event you get a contract with an indie or trad publisher, are there things you should look out for? Yes. Now, usual preface applies. I am not a lawyer, but that does not mean I'm inexperienced in the ways of book contracts. I have been on the receiving end as well as the issuing end of this deal, so I'm going to give you some general ideas. The language and the specific names of these things might vary from contract to contract, but here's some stuff you want to look out for. All right. And let's start with the real basic stuff. You want to make sure it's clear how and when and how much you're getting paid. You also want to be clear about what you're doing for that pay. If this is a case where you're getting paid in installments, you want to make sure that it's spelled out when those installments happen. If this is something straightforward, like you get every 2 months, you get X amount of dollars, that's fine. But if this is tied to something like, here's when you get paid when you submit the final book, and then you'll get paid again when the final book goes to the printer, and then you get paid again when the book's released to the public, because those are pretty common advanced terms. You want to make sure you know when you're getting paid, how much you're getting paid, and how you're getting paid. They're going to, Cash App. They're going to PayPal. They're going to pay you in, pizza, whatever the hell it might be. You want to know when and how much you get paid. Next thing. If there's any work due, if there's deadlines, if there's requirements, if there's, a job to be done here, which is usually the case in a contract, you want it spelled out what you're doing and what you've done and what you still need to do. So if this contract you're about to sign is for delivery of a finished book on a certain date, that needs to be there. Not a vague TBD, I get around to it when I get around to it. You want a hard and fast date. And that date should also be tied to other dates on the thing. Like, I deliver my book to you on the 1st of the month and you pay me by the 5th of the month. Clear, easy. When in doubt, clarity and specificity are your friends here, because you want to lay out who's doing what, who's responsible for what needs to happen in what order, and then how does somebody get paid or pay for a thing. It's also worth pointing out, writers, you shouldn't be paying others if you're not doing anything, meaning you shouldn't pay your publisher to print your book. That's their job. You let them do their job. That's on them. You should not pay your agent, your pimp, to make phone calls for you. That's not a thing in your book contract. You want to make sure everybody's doing a job on a deadline with a timeline for pay, arriving at certain clear times. Other thing I want to throw in here, there needs to be, there better be some clause or outlet that describes when the rights to things come back to you. Whether it's, all rights revert to you, the creator of the material, after a year or a year and a day after, the first 90 days of sales, or, 3 months after the printing, or whatever it might be. You want to know when your rights come back to you, because signing this contract for this book deal means that you don't have the rights to your book. You are functionally renting your book. You're leasing it to this publisher. They're going to take over and produce it, and in exchange, they'll pay you some portion eventually, because that's an advance. So you want to make sure you know when your stuff comes back, because it should come back because it's yours. You want to, in this case, you want to avoid the phrases in perpetuity and throughout the universe, because that means in perpetuity means you'd never get something back, and throughout the universe means there are no ways of really, they get it and can do whatever with it, which is not a situation you want to be in. One more we'll throw in. How about what is a kill clause? A set of conditions or behavior or operations, a method for how you can terminate this relationship early. For instance, for me, in my contracts for editing and stuff, there's a kill clause. If this isn't working out, if you and I can't seem to get on the same page, or we're just not a good fit, and we're testy, and it's just not a healthy relationship for both of us, and it doesn't appear like the work is going to get done on one end or the other, here's a set amount of money that will, I will get paid in addition to whatever work I've gotten done. You'll get your book back, incomplete as it might be, and I will have this money, and we can go on about our ways. It's sort of like the escape hatch, the get out of trouble clause. Okay, this isn't working. Smoke bomb and go. Kill clause. Whether that's, you have to notify me a day in advance, 2 weeks in advance, you're going to pay me $750, or 2/3 of the price of the invoice, whatever's larger, or whatever the term might be, whatever the setup might be. You want to make sure it's spelled out in that contract that there is some way for you to get out of it if it sucks. If it's not in there, ask for it to be in there. Or inform them that you will have your lawyer on your side, because you can bring a lawyer to these things. It's a contract. You are allowed to get a lawyer. Don't let them, bully you. Just because they're a publisher and you're you does not mean you somehow don't have rights or abilities here. If you want to get a lawyer to go read a thing, get a lawyer to go read a thing. Absolutely. But if you're unhappy with the terms or something isn't listed, get it on the page. Get it in there. Make it work. And then beyond that, you want to, the contract should list what it is you're going to do. So if you're signing a book deal, it should be for, the mass production and dissemination of your book across specific and listed things. We're going to put it on, we're going to get it on these store shelves at, this date. It's going to go on an audiobook or whatever on that date. It's going to be, this, that, or the other. Everything humanly possible that you can think of in terms of what goes out into the world at what time or date or in what way can go in this contract. That's a lot. It should be a lot. How do I say this? Read your contract. Do not sign it blind. Do not sign it if they're making promises about, we'll fill that in later. Oh no. Fill it in fucking now and get it back to me. You do not have to sign. There are going to be some people out there who are going to want to pressure you and hurry you up and lean on you and take advantage of you not knowing, or take advantage of you not questioning because you're too busy looking at the dollar signs, or you're looking at they're hyping up a positive future. And I get that that's really appealing, and I get that that's really scary, but stop and read before you put your name on something. And stop and read, and you read it, and then have somebody else read it. Take your time. I hope that helps. On we go. Question 8. How do you maintain tension in a time travel story? It's a great question. The primary problem in a time travel story is that time travel can be a solution for a lot of people. There's a moment in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure where they realize that what they need to do in this moment is have a garbage can land on somebody's head to slow them down and then get the keys so that they can go do the rest of the plot. And then those things suddenly happen. Time travel is often quickly used to resolve plot problems. Like, I can just go back in time and fix it. I can just go back in time and do that constantly without recourse. And the problem that sets up is it eliminates problems. So therefore it eliminates tensions. The normal way we deal with that, or the easiest, most common way we deal with that in a time travel story, is to give time travel a cost. We can only time travel if we have plutonium for our DeLorean. We can only travel back in time if if the clock tower in the middle of town gets struck by lightning. We can only time travel twice because it uses this rare exotic fuel, or our time travel machine is broken or something. We create an artificial reason to limit time travel. The other solution is to make time travel difficult. One of the ways Doctor Who gets around that is by either suggesting that there are fixed rules as to when or where you can or can't time travel, or it makes the act of time travel imprecise. The TARDIS takes the Doctor or wherever the TARDIS thinks the Doctor needs to be, even if that isn't somewhere the Doctor wants to be. By creating those boundaries in a time travel story, you're making the time travel more interesting and less of a given. Time travel should not ideally be like me walking out of the office and going into my kitchen and then coming back. It should not be a thoughtless, easy thing, because time travel is a major narrative tool and it should be used as such. That tension doesn't necessarily have to only come from the act of time travel itself. You can also get tension out of the consequences. If there's a great opening to an episode of The Simpsons where Homer ends up back in time, he steps on a butterfly, and then when he comes back to the present, everybody is, I think, like a weird mutant slug monster. Rick and Morty cashed in on that a lot as well. The consequences can always create new tension. You see this in, Back to the Future, where the positive consequences are celebrated. Oh, look, we've avoided rape. And now, Dad's a best-selling author and everything is delightful. And Biff is our sniveling car wash guy. Whereas the other way around, we can go into an alternate dimension where Biff is a jerk and Dad's dead. Yeah, that's a whole thing. Look for the consequences to also help support tension. Look for boundaries in time travel to help you support tension. And don't be afraid to add further complication, either because of consequences or boundaries. So if I go back in time, let's say I get a time machine, one of the first things I'm going to do is go back to like 1995 and talk to me and say, hey, look, from 1996 on, your life is going to take a pretty hard turn. And maybe we could avoid doing some of these things, even if that risks meaning that I from 2024 will be unable to exist because some of the things, all the things that made me in 2024 happened between, 1996 and 2024. So I'm willing to risk my own existence. But those kinds of questions and challenges and possibilities and the complications and the consequences help maintain tension in time travel. It's a really interesting way of exploring storytelling, because one of the things we all sort of take for granted is that time moves in one direction. It's always forward and the story always responds to it. Things happen, then more things happen, and then it builds up, and then we deal with it, and then it's done. If we take that expectation off the table, every story becomes more interesting. Something to think about. On we go. Question 9. I need a mouthful of tea. Otherwise, I'm going to start coughing into this microphone. Question 9. How do I handle being jealous of someone writing something that is so good I'm angry I didn't write it? That's not jealousy. I mean, it is, but it has nothing to do with them. It doesn't even have anything to do with what they wrote. It has everything to do with how you feel about your own writing. The treatment plan here, the plan for care here, is to find support. Remember, we talked about support when we were talking about writers and success. This is where this comes back, because it's okay if somebody writes a thing that's really good. You getting angry about it is not so good. Not because they're your competition. They're not your competition. People can buy multiple books all the time. But it's more about how their success provokes in you a feeling that becomes anger. So my guess, and this is just a guess, my guess is that it's provoking in you some sense of inadequacy. Why didn't I write that? Why can't I do something like that? Well, you can. You can learn how to do that. You can ask for help. You can just practice more. You can do both of those things. You should do both of those things. Practice more and get help. And then you can write something that'll make, somebody else feel feelings. Jealousy and anger are not the best way to go. They will eat you from the inside. They will melt your guts. They will wreck your art. It'll turn everything sort of on its ear in a bad way. But it's about supporting yourself and believing in yourself. And if your knee-jerk response to me saying that is by telling me that you can't do that because that means you're bragging, you're going to have a really hard time publishing a book, because it's not bragging to believe in yourself. It's not wrong to choose yourself, to pick yourself. You're not a bad person for saying, fuck yeah, I'm doing a great job. That's not arrogant. It doesn't mean you're getting a big head. It's not a sin. You're not disappointing somebody. You're not hurting other people by not putting them first here. You're just saying that you're as good as they are. You're as good as, all those other people that you put ahead of you. They're people just like you, and you deserve it as much as they do. You don't have to get jealous. It can motivate you. It can irritate you. It can wrinkle you. It can absolutely just bug the shit out of you. But don't get angry at them. They worked really hard. Figure out how they did it. Oh, see what they did there with the comma? See how that's a really beautiful sentence? They just strung together some words to say something really clearly. I wonder if I could write something that clear or something that effective. What would it take for me to do that? Turn that anger, turn that jealousy, turn that frustration about somebody else, turn it into an opportunity for you. And then all of a sudden there's something we can do about it. Oh, what would it take for me to write like that? I probably need like like some courage. I probably need like some I need to be relaxed. I better sit down and like figure out how to deal with this anxiety I have. Or, oh, I better just, not overthink it and just write the first thing that comes out of me. Turn your anger or frustration into something supportive and actionable, and you'll see the anger and frustration diminish over time. But you've got to be willing to do that work. It's not their fault. It's not even your fault. You've been conditioned to feel like your art has to be ranked, and that better ranking is somehow a sign of better quality in yourself. Like, I'm better than you, and therefore I'm good. This is the downside of that. They wrote something great. It's awesome. You can write other things that are great. That's awesome too. You just have to let yourself do that. Good question. Are there more questions from anybody in chat or anybody else? Let me just quick skim social media, make sure I didn't miss a thing. Okay. Shall we keep going? Yeah, let's keep going. Question 10. What do I do if I have an idea for how a story should be so firmly in my head, but I can't seem to get it right on the page? That's a big question. I hope you realize that's a big question, but here we go. This is how that works. This is how we do that thing. If you are incredibly attached to it, for whatever reason, what I can tell you is this. It doesn't have to be that way. You have complete control over it. I know there's a lot of discussion about how you're just a vessel for your idea. And you are. But at the same time, you're also in charge of dispensing the story. You're a vessel with a valve. And the harder and more rigidly you hold that idea in your head, the harder it's going to be to do something about it. That's going to just set you up to be frustrated, because the more you can't get it right, whatever that means, the more of a failure you're going to feel. And you don't need to. If you hold on to it too tightly, you're limiting your ability to produce it and recreate it, because you're almost always going to fall short and or be overly critical. So let's not do that. Maybe let's instead, do something different. It's tempting, because when we craft our stories and we spend a lot of time in our head and we spend a lot of time escaping or getting away from our life through the fantasy of our writing, and we sit down and we want to be creative and we want to flex those muscles and we want to have an active imagination, it can be really tempting to put all that stuff on a pedestal, because it's brought you comfort, because it's been a joy, because it's been how you've spent time. It's because it's how you've comforted yourself or made yourself feel successful. That's all fine and good. Translating it into a different medium, it's important to remember that it doesn't have to retain 100% of all that accuracy. Some stuff's just for you. And the word I keep stumbling on, the word I'm searching through as I try to answer this, is right. Getting it right on the page. Because what's right? Do you mean accurate? Because that just means slowing down and being deliberate in saying what's in your head, translating it one-to-one, making decisions, putting it down. If right means the best, getting it perfect, you've only set yourself up to fail. There is no perfect. You can't chase perfect. It doesn't work that way. What you can instead focus on is doing the best you can on any given day relative to whatever is going on. if you're holding on to the idea so tightly because you think it's perfect, it might be. It might not be. But if you are most soothed by the fact that it's all yours and it's perfect, I would question whether or not you're really willing to share it, or if you would only produce it as a book to show off that you made it, which is a tough question to grapple with, but definitely something worth grappling and considering. Because if your idea of writing your perfect idea down is just to show off that you're perfect so that other people validate you, that is so screamingly loud of your insecurity and absence of support that I'm very sorry. But if you are crafting an idea that is perfect and you know that in sharing it, some pieces may be changed or affected or altered because in the act of sharing it is transformed, and the idea is that if I can get them 90% of what I see, they'll love it, then by all means write your book. But publishing your idea is not about 100% replication of this perfect thing in your head. We're not making widgets. We're not stamping them out of a factory. It's about crafting a piece of art, and that means being attached to the big picture, but not necessarily the specifics, which can be tough for a lot of people. So that's my roundabout, slightly abstract answer. It's a good question. On we go. Question 11. Why do people make such a big deal out of announcing they have an agent? Okay, first of all, I'm going to take a sidebar here for a second and point out that I have forgotten to record the audio for this whole chat, which sucks. Because I looked over to make sure my light was blinking to make sure that it was recording, and I realized I didn't even do that. I didn't press the button when we started. So that's a thing I'll have to deal with later. And I'm announcing that mainly to call myself out and point out that, hey, podcast people, you'll be getting something different than this. So let's call this a web exclusive kind of vibe. Now, to answer this question, why do people make such a big deal out of announcing they have an agent? On one hand, it's because they've worked very, very hard to get a pimp and be exploited and have some of their money taken. I'm very glad you were here for the exclusive too. It would have really bugged me if nobody was here. People want to announce that they worked very hard to have someone take 10 to 15% of their money. Good job getting a parasite. I'm very excited for you. They worked really hard. They got a lot of rejections. They jumped through a lot of hoops. They want their effort recognized. To them, it's legit. To them, it's a big deal. To them, it's a payoff of an effort. And that's fine. I disagree with it. I don't think you need to do it. I think it's a waste. I think it's wrong. I think they're not doing anything that you couldn't do yourself if people just, didn't have to make it mysterious or gatekeepery. But people like to make a big deal about it because they want people to celebrate, because they want to feel good for a minute, because the hashtag writing community is not something built on a lot of support. It's built on infighting, competition, and fantasy. It's built on this idea that what we can do and what we have is this constant ranking system. I have to do better than you, and I have to do this in order to be good enough, and all this falderall. And coming up with a way of doing that and finding these signposts to say, I'm legit because I have this, it doesn't really matter, but people think it matters, so they engage in it. Like, you're not a more legit writer because you have a pimp. You just have somebody to whom you give 10 to 15% of your effort to, and who takes money for your labor while they themselves didn't contribute to it. And if you think that makes you legit, we probably should have a bigger talk about labor and effort and support. But they make a big deal about it because it's an accomplishment to them. As wrong as it might be, as weird as it might be, they make a big deal about it because they want somebody to support them. because they don't know necessarily how to get that support any other way than by pointing out a thing they did that somebody else didn't. Support is everything. And this is one of the reasons why. This is what they wanted to do. And as I am told by any number of people I've ever been in relationships with or anything like that, I have to let people be wrong on the internet. Even if I think this is wrong, gotta let them do it. But they're doing it because they need support, because they're looking for validation. They're looking for someone to tell them that they've done good because they haven't developed the tools to do that to themselves in a meaningful way, because the rest of the community let them down, because they didn't build a support network, because they didn't know any better, or they didn't try, or they just didn't care. So they announced they have an agent. Hey, look, I'm being exploited, everybody. Celebrate me. Yay! I guess that's if that's what you want to do. Sure. Enjoy. I guess. On we go. Question 12. Do I really need an alpha reader? No. Just no. You don't. You don't need it. No. We don't have to turn every step in the writing process into some kind of profound professional milestone. You don't. You can have a beta reader later when you're further along in your process. Because really, what is your alpha reader doing? Just telling you that you're doing okay. That this idea you've got is something that somebody else would want to read. So my question to you is, why wasn't that an assumption you made already? Why didn't you just assume that, yeah, I'm going to write the shit out of this idea. I'm going to kill this thing. It's going to be a banger. Somebody's going to want to read it. Why didn't you walk into the situation like that? Why did we have to go find somebody to pat you on the head? What support, see, here's a theme we're talking about. What support would you have needed, starting at what point, and persisting or increasing over time, so that you knew anybody who read your stuff at any point, whether it's a writing group, by the way, writing group people count as alpha readers, a writing group, a coaching session, by the way, coaching counts as alpha reading, a best friend one afternoon, by the way, a best friend on an afternoon counts as an alpha reader. What do you need? Anybody who reads your stuff before it's done, depending on the degree it's done at, is some kind of reader. My question to you is not, does their label matter? It's, what are they giving you? Is it just validation? Pat on the head? Tell you that, oh, they like it, keep going? Why couldn't you give that to yourself? And why do you think you needed someone else's approval to continue making the thing you believe in? Do you perhaps not believe in it? It is something to consider, but in answer to your question, no, you don't need an alpha reader. Knock that shit off. On we go to our last question of the day. Wow, we've been going for 90 minutes. That's rad. Here we go. Question 13. How am I supposed to make people leave reviews? The word I stumble over here is make. One of the reasons my last relationship ended was because in the course of several arguments, I laid out this idea that one of the things I have a big deal about is making somebody happy. Making somebody happy is sort of forcing my want of happiness onto them. You can't do that. You can't make somebody happy. You can encourage them to be happy. You can create an environment where they might be happy, but I can't force that feeling. That was a really big light bulb moment for me personally. And now when any time somebody brings up, I got to make somebody do a thing, I think about that fight. I think about the end of that relationship. And I think about the number of times in my own life I've wanted to make somebody do a thing. And nearly every time it hasn't gone well, either because I've had to force something or flex something or exert some kind of effort or will or authority or power in order to accomplish something that at the end of the day, I should not have done that to get that end result. You cannot make somebody leave a review. You cannot make somebody like your book. They have free will. I know that's really annoying in some circumstances, but I'm kidding. But you can't force them. You can suggest, you can encourage, you can make the reviews easy, Google Forms. You can incentivize, you can say, hey, here's a review, just leave a review if you liked the book. It really goes a long way. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Even 2 sentences makes all the difference in the world. I can't make you click like and subscribe on YouTube, but I can sure tell you that if you were to do that, it would make my life a little bit better. It's really easy on your part, and I promise that any updates I make are pretty unobtrusive, and it's okay if you never notice me on your YouTube subscription page. I can make it as easy as possible from my end, and I can encourage you, but I can't make you take that action. So when you need reviews, instead of trying to make people do it, just ask. And understand that the way we've set up this system of algorithmic survival, you're going to get a review maybe like 1 to 2% of the time you get a sale. So if we're already struggling for sales, consider yourself very lucky if you get a lot of reviews initially, because people don't like leaving reviews. They don't like leaving reviews not because they didn't like the book, but because the process of leaving a review is often tedious, because it's weird on some level to stop and focus on something else and evaluate it. And just like you had that fear about being judged for writing what you were writing, they likely have a fear about, them making an opinion known. They don't want to be criticized either, no more than you do. So you can't make them. You can just encourage them. You can't bribe them either. They close those loopholes. But you can encourage. Hey, thanks so much for checking out my book. I really appreciate it. A 1-sentence review goes a long way. Just tell a friend. If you like this book and you know somebody else in your life who you think would benefit from this, let them know. Give them your copy. They don't even have to go buy a book. If you, for instance, here you go. Here's one of the things I say in many chats and recordings. Hey, if anything I've said today has resonated with you, helped you, opened up a door in your brain, got you thinking, got you encouraged, 2 of the best things you can do are not only like and subscribe on this video, but also head over to patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better in order to support more of what I do. For $2 a month, you can do a whole lot of supporting. I can't make you go. I can't show up at your house and type the, URL into your browser. I can't stand there while you open it up on your phone. But I can tell you that it'll be a big deal. I can tell you that it'll really help. I can keep the bar for entry at $2 really low so you can do it. You can even sign up for a free 7-day trial and just see if you like it. This week, by the way, on Patreon, we're doing Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm going to watch that tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. It's going to be long, but the point is I can't make anybody do this. If I could make anybody do anything, I'm going full Sith Lord. I'll be Magneto from the X-Men movies in about 20 minutes. I'm going villain. I know me. I believe people are inherently good, but I know me. You can't make people. You can just encourage. And again, it goes back to support. If you've got people around you who help you, who believe in you, who respect you, who care about you, who want to see you succeed, and you've made it possible for them to do so in a way that is not obtrusive and not overly undue and not hyper complicated or expensive on their end, and the cost, whether it's financial or time, is low, they're likely to do it. They will show up for you if you show up for them. And just having a book is not enough showing up. Give that some thought, because it's a real issue. But as long as we let the algorithms drive everything, we are going to stay in this cycle of constantly needing reviews in order to be in search results, in order to get sales, in order to be successful. It wasn't always this way, and it doesn't have to stay this way. Consider for a minute why we keep it this way. Who profits? Also something to think about. But no, you can't make people leave reviews. You can just encourage. Are there any questions about anything, including but not limited to just how much of a villain I would be, how quickly? Because the answer is shockingly quick and incredibly evil. Because I know me. I know what pain and holes I'd be filling in my life, and I know how I would do it. So, not exactly a shiny, happy rainbow moment for your boy on this end of the microphone. Side note, if we're going to answer the what mutant power would you need to be evil, it's magnetism, by far. Or just give me force powers, and we are going to shoot some lightning at some people and maybe not build a giant galactic empire, but most definitely wield a red lightsaber and do some business. That's just me. My answer used to be a lot more detailed and provocative because I thought I had to be edgy in order to make my point. I have mellowed in my old age. I'm just going to tell you right now, like, it's a very short line from where I'm at to, oh shit, I guess I got to be evil for a little while. That's just me. Shall we get out of here? Have I dragged on and on enough? Yeah, let's get out of here. Let's do it. So, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for checking this all out. As I said, if you liked any part of this, including my scintillating discussion about how quickly I would turn into an evil bad guy, you can feel free to support me not being an evil bad guy by heading over to patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. And side note, small note, you can get me every day in your ears. Just go wherever you get podcasts and search for John Helps You Write Better. It would mean the world to me for you to check out everything. There's some great stuff coming. There was a great podcast today. I think you'll super like it. And yes, this was a web exclusive thing. It's going to go straight to YouTube, and I will figure out what to put on the podcast feed later. I'm probably just going to take like one question and like deep dive on it. Well, we'll do that. We'll deal with that tomorrow as well. But for now, thank you so much for being here. All power to all people. Take care of yourselves. Love yourself. Find things that bring you joy. You deserve it. And the next time I'm in your eyes and in your ears, let me grab my calendar. We'll be, oh my God, it's February next week? Yeah, it's February next week. We'll be on Tuesday, February 6th. I'll be right back here for the next Writer's Chat. Thanks for being here. I love you. I'll talk to you soon. See ya.